The message came in at 11:42 p.m., and I read it 3 times before I allowed myself to feel anything. My girlfriend texted, "I need a break. Don't contact me." And for a few seconds, the silence in my apartment felt louder than the words themselves. Her name was Sloane Harrington, and she had never sounded this cold before. Not distant, not tired, cold. I typed one word back. "Okay." Then I placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there, staring at the reflection of myself in the dark window. Because something inside me already knew this wasn't just a break. This was a decision. And more importantly, it was a test. My name is Carter Whitfield, and I had spent the last 2 years building something I thought was stable. Not perfect, but real. We met in Greenwich, Connecticut, at a charity gala neither of us actually cared about. She was standing near the wine display, pretending to read the label of a bottle she had no intention of drinking. I made a comment about overpriced Cabernet. She smiled, but it wasn't a polite smile. It was the kind that said she noticed things most people missed. That night turned into a conversation. That conversation turned into dinners. And those dinners slowly became something neither of us officially labeled at first. Sloane was sharp, controlled, the kind of woman who didn't waste words or emotions. And I respected that. But there was always something just beneath her surface. A quiet calculation. At first, I mistook it for strength. Later, I realized it was distance. Over time, our relationship found a rhythm. Weekdays were focused, structured, efficient. Weekends were softer, more relaxed, almost normal. We traveled together. We met each other's friends. We even talked about moving in. But there were moments, small ones, where she would pull back without explanation. A canceled plan, a delayed reply, a sudden shift in tone. And every time I asked, she would say the same thing. "I just need space sometimes." I believed her, or maybe I chose to, because the alternative required asking questions I wasn't ready to hear answers to. 3 weeks before that message, something changed. Not dramatically, subtly. She became more present on her phone than she was with me. More distracted during conversations. More precise with her words. Like she was measuring everything she said. One night, we were sitting in her apartment in downtown Greenwich. She was scrolling through her phone while I was talking about a client meeting that had gone sideways. I stopped mid-sentence. She didn't notice. That's when I realized the distance wasn't random anymore. It was intentional. Before we go further, let me ask you something. If you felt someone slowly pulling away from you without explanation, would you confront it directly, or would you wait and see what they reveal on their own? Because I chose to wait, and waiting comes with a cost. The week after that, she canceled 2 dinners. The reasons were vague. Work, stress, timing, all believable, none convincing. Then came the message. "I need a break. Don't contact me." No explanation, no discussion, just a boundary drawn without context. And here's the part that mattered. She expected a reaction, a chase, an emotional response that would confirm her importance in my life. But I gave her none of that. I gave her silence. And then I quietly started canceling things. Not out of anger, out of clarity. The trip we had booked to Napa Valley. Canceled. The reservation at the restaurant she had been excited about. Canceled. The concert tickets I bought for her birthday. Transferred. Every shared plan we had built over the next 2 months. Removed. I didn't announce it. I didn't send a message explaining it. I simply adjusted my life to match her words. A break. No contact. No expectations. No placeholders. At first, it felt mechanical, like I was going through motions without emotion. But underneath that, something steadier was forming. Acceptance. Because if someone asks for distance, what they're really asking for is freedom. And freedom works both ways. For days passed, then 6, then 9. No message from her. No check-in. Nothing. Which told me everything I needed to know. On the 10th day, my phone lit up with her name. "Why did you cancel Napa?" I looked at the message for a long time before responding. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I wanted to say it without emotion. "You said you needed a break." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. That doesn't mean you just erase everything. And there it was. The misunderstanding. Or maybe the expectation. She wanted distance without consequence. Space without change. A pause button on a relationship that only she controlled. Let me ask you this, and think about it honestly. If someone tells you not to contact them, are you still responsible for maintaining what you built together? Or does that responsibility in the moment they step away? Because my answer was simple. It ends. I didn't erase anything, I replied. I respected what you asked for. Her next message came faster. That's not what I meant. But meaning doesn't matter if it isn't communicated. And silence fills in the gaps people leave behind. We met 3 days later. Her idea, a coffee shop in Westport. Neutral ground. She walked in wearing the same composed expression she always had. But her eyes were different, less certain, more searching. You overreacted, she said, sitting across from me. No, calmly. I adjusted. She leaned back slightly, studying me. You could have asked what I meant. I could have, I said. But you could have explained. The conversation moved in circles for a while. Not arguments. Clarifications. Misaligned expectations finally being spoken out loud. She admitted she wanted space to think, to figure things out. But she assumed everything between us would remain intact while she did. I explained that space changes things by default, because absence forces decisions. Eventually, she asked the question that mattered. Do you still want this? I paused, not for effect, but because the answer had changed. I wanted what we had, I said, but what we had doesn't exist anymore. She looked down at her hands. For the first time since I met her, she didn't have control over the conversation. And it showed. There was no dramatic ending, no raised voices, no acquiescence, just a quiet understanding settling between two people who had reached different conclusions at different times. We finished our coffee. We walked out together, and then we went in opposite directions, not as enemies, not even as strangers, just as two people who finally understood the cost of unclear boundaries. Personal reflection. Relationships often fail not because of a single event, but because of how people interpret silence, space, and expectation. Sloane's request for a break was not inherently wrong. People do need time to think, reassess, and breathe. But the issue was not the request itself. It was the lack of clarity around what that request meant. From her perspective, she believed she was pausing the emotional intensity while preserving the structure of the relationship. From Carter's perspective, her words signaled a withdrawal of commitment, which required him to recalibrate his own expectations and actions. Neither response was irrational. They were simply operating under different assumptions. This situation highlights a common psychological dynamic. When one person seeks distance, they often underestimate the emotional impact it has on the other person. At the same time, the person receiving that distance must decide whether to wait, pursue, or let go. Each choice carries its own risks. Waiting can lead to prolonged uncertainty. Pursuing can lead to loss of self-respect. Letting go can feel premature. What Carter demonstrated was a boundary rooted in interpretation rather than reaction. He did not act out of anger. He acted out of alignment with what was explicitly communicated to him. Sloane, on the other hand, expected flexibility without explicitly requesting it. And that gap between expectation and communication is where the relationship ultimately broke down. In many ways, neither person was entirely right or wrong. They simply revealed how differently two people can understand the same moment.